Well, it's hard to drive through Denver and Aurora and not notice the homeless camps that have sprung up.
Yeah, Aurora's mayor wanted to know why there were so many and how he could help those living there.
So he went undercover as a homeless person for a week and told only our Sean Boyd he was going to do it. She showed us his journey last night. Sean is back with more. What he learned from this could result, Sean, in a new approach to solving this crisis.
Jim, after living on the streets for a week, Mayor Coffman says he has a new understanding of what is driving the growing number of homeless in Aurora and Denver. What he saw in encampments and shelters shocked him, and the changes he's now proposing may come as a shock to those who think the homeless problem is all about housing. What did you learn from a week of living on the street and living in shelters?
I never want to do it again. Number one.
Meet Homeless Mike. 1 week ago, Mayor Mike Coffman set out on an extraordinary quest. You will text me every day. Going undercover as a homeless veteran, walking streets, sleeping on sidewalks, and documenting his journey and the people he met along the way in text messages to me. He took no money, no food, and lost what little he did have when his backpack was stolen.
It was really hard.
But you described it.
But incredibly impactful.
As a mayor, Coffman wanted to know what was behind the growing number of homeless, not from those studying it, but those living it. As one of them, he found out. Is it what you expected?
No. I thought really that the numbers would be driven by the economy, by COVID.
And they weren't.
They were not.
In the shelters, he says, most of the people he met had lived there for years. Many, he says, told him they were from out of state.
I would talk to them, and they would have a vision of maybe what they would want to do, but they would have absolutely no plan to get there.
What he saw in the encampments.
You all right?
Yeah, dude, I'm just tweaking, man.
Far more troubling, young people openly using meth, heroin, and cocaine. Their addictions, he says, facilitated by those who think they're helping.
It's kind of this dropout mentality, drug culture that is sustained by a lot of well-meaning individuals who give money, who bring food.
If you could speak openly to these people who are bringing all this food to these encampments, what would you say to them?
I would say, you know, you're hurting these people. You're really prolonging what is really a negative lifestyle that eventually is going to kill these young people.
What is the solution?
There are no redeeming qualities about the encampments, none whatsoever. I think they're a public safety menace. I think they're a public health disaster, and I just think they got to go.
But they won't go to the shelters.
You can't continue subsidizing a lifestyle that is so harmful to them. I think represents a public safety and a public health problem to the community at large.
He says the shelters he visited are also enabling a life of dependency. While some here are too mentally ill to work, most, he says, are not.
You know, you ought to do something. You ought to sweep the floor, you ought to, you know, mop the floor, you ought to help in the kitchen and do something, but there were no responsibilities whatsoever.
Those who stay here, he says, should be required to get drug treatment or job training.
To commit to doing something affirmative that in exchange for taxpayer benefits.
And if they don't?
I think we're not helping them.
But won't we have more people on the streets?
Yes, I think at some point in time, you have to say enough is enough. I think we have to have a different vision in order be compassionate to those who are homeless, and to be fair to the taxpayers of America.
What we're doing now, he says, is clearly not working. He's seen that firsthand.
This is hard. I mean, it was really hard.
But was it worth it?
It was absolutely worth it.
Just a week before Coffman hit the streets, he got a call out of the blue from Denver Mayor Michael Hancock about working on a metro-wide solution to homelessness, something Coffman now thinks should include some personal responsibility. Some 20 years ago, as a state lawmaker, he wrote the bill that created the Colorado Works program, which provides temporary assistance to needy families who can show they are trying to improve their situation, something he thinks the homeless should do. Karen?
Sean, I'll take it back. We know Denver has the camping ban. Does the mayor think that would be a good idea for Aurora?
Before this, he was considering one, even had it drafted. Now he's holding off on it. He says Aurora's camping problem is not what Denver's is. But what he would maybe like to see is a campaign to urge people not to provide food and other provisions that he says enable those who simply want to live in the tents and use drugs.
All right, Sean, thanks so much.